Hi everyone, I'll just get this presentation up.
You're right. So then you two might want to slide across so you're going to get blinded by the light.
So today I'm going to talk about the bell frogs at Kogarah, the Arncliffe population that's threatened by the WestConnex. Let's get this going. So the green and golden bell frog, the lower Cooks River key population is what this population is known as. And yeah, that's what the frog looks like, very pretty frog looking animal. So I'll give a bit of background on the frog first. So this is sort of important to note. The ecology and behaviour of this species, it's a very aquatic frog and it requires a large area of land to roam across. So most people would associate frogs with sort of a pond and something. These frogs love living in ponds, but they also need a big area sort of around the pond to forage for food, move away, spend the time over winter. So these frogs have been recorded moving up to 1 kilometre in one night and up to 5 kilometres between recaptures. So it's a pretty big distance for a frog, that sort of size. And they'll often bask in day. You can see them by day, and over winter they tend to hide away under logs or some kind of debris. So this frog's an endangered species. It's suffered a massive systematic decline basically across most of its range since the 1970s to around 2000, and continuing to decline to this day, but that was sort of the key time when it started disappearing. So the reasons this frog started disappearing was habitat. It's a combination of all these effects. So habitat loss, habitat degradation, habitat fragmentation, barriers to dispersal which stop the movement, introduced predators such as foxes and mosquito fish on the tadpoles, and fungus which is causing a bad disease in frogs worldwide called chytrid fungus. So that infects the skin and pretty much kills the frog quite quickly. So this is the distribution of the green and golden bell frog, current and historic. So if you can see the area in grey, that's where the frog was known from up to about 1970. And the areas in black, the little dots along the coast, is where the frog is found now. So as you can see, it's really, really contracted, and isolated populations along the coast is where this frog is known from. So the current status of this frog. So in New South Wales, it's listed as an endangered species on the Threatened Species Act, and a vulnerable species Australia-wide on the EPBC Act. So this offers them some protection, I guess you could say, against most sort of developments and stuff, or at least it should. In Sydney, we had 4 populations up until a few years ago. So most people might have heard of the Homebush population at Sydney Olympic Park. There's heaps of bell frogs there. They sort of got in the way of the Olympics, but they sort of worked around them, and there's actually quite a lot of frogs there, probably about over 1,000 individuals, and that population has been stable for a good while now. So Arncliffe, that's the second population. That's the lower Cooks River population, the one at Kogarah Golf Course. So it's also stable, but a much lower population size, ranges between about 20 and to 100. So numbers sort of go up and down, but always sort of within that sort of number. So there's another population at Greenacre that no one's really seen for the last sort of 10 years. We don't really know what the status of that population is. And the other population at Kurnell has declined, probably is extinct now. It was last seen there in 2009. So we're essentially down to 2 populations of this frog in Sydney that was once found across the entire Sydney basin. So I'd like to think we'd be able to hold on to them, but I don't know. So there was a draft recovery plan published by the New South Wales Office of Environment Heritage. It was called something different back in 2005, probably DEC. And this sort of recovery plan sort of aimed to sort of step out the method on how to sort of recover this species from the brink of extinction, essentially. So the lower Cooks River key population, so this is centred on Kogarah Golf Course and the adjacent lands. So population is small, but breeding still occurs yearly in both these man-made RTA ponds, which are specifically made for the bell frogs, and other ponds on the golf course and little soaky areas. And the recent surveys for this species at Kogarah detected 6 individuals in November 2015 and 8 individuals in February 2016. So as you can sort of imagine, these aren't big numbers of frogs, they're quite fragile there. And this is the similar numbers that were detected at this site when I worked here with Cumberland Ecology between 2005 and 2009. I don't think we ever got more than 9 frogs on one night, but you'd always find some. So this is the distribution of the population. So if you can see here, that Kogarah Golf Course is fairly obvious, and the yellow dots are where the frogs were recorded. So each one of those spots is where we recorded frogs. Usually they're around ponds, sometimes just sitting out on fairways. That orange diamond that you can sort of see just outside of the space there is where the RTA ponds that they specifically built for bell frog breeding are. And this blue star in that sort of other area is where I recorded a breeding pair. So the breeding occurs also on the golf course as well, not just in the RTA ponds. And most recently, breeding occurred between the RTA pond and that red line in a little sort of drainage line just on the golf course. So that was where they've been breeding this year. And that red boundary is the development footprint for Cogra Golf Course. So that's where the WestConnex wants to build its smokestacks and everything else. So as you can see, it sort of takes out right the middle chunk. Is that time?
That's right. No, you've got another 30 seconds.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, cool. I'll keep going.
You can have a minute if you want.
All right, cool. So yeah, that was probably the key sort of figure. You can see that they really want to take out the center of these frogs. So they occupy about 12 hectares of land, and WestConnex stands to take away about 7 hectares of this. So this includes all the supplementary breeding areas and good foraging habitat. Like I said, this is a roaming species that needs a lot of space to go. So what do WestConnex want to do? They want to try to mitigate this by captive breeding and building new ponds elsewhere. But I'll first start off by saying that captive breeding rarely works for these frogs, these bell frogs. It's shown time and time again it has not worked. So they've tried reintroducing them at Longreef, Marrickville, a couple other places in Sydney, and it has failed miserably every time, except at Homebush where they sort of expanded the existing population. So I think this will probably not work. It's probably going to drive the population to extinction. So this is their mitigation measure. They want to put in 3 new ponds on the edge of Marsh Street. So this is off to the edge. Like you have to cross a big road to get here, and then they want to fence the frogs in. So this is a cannibalistic frog species, right? The adults will readily prey on the juveniles. That's why they disperse so widely. So if you have all these frogs confined to one area, they're just going to eat each other, and if any get out, they're just going to end up on the road and get run over. Quite sad, really. So what does the recovery plan say should happen? Well, they should say they should be maintaining existing green and bell frog populations. So this recovery plan is a government document, and enhance existing habitat, increase connectivity of populations. So the current habitat has been left to degrade. There's been no effort to restore the connectivity or enhance the habitat. It's hard to see how that is possibly in line with the recovery plan at all. But and WestConnex isn't going to help. So what else do they want to do? Well, there's other biodiversity costs as well. So there's they want to remove 1.4 hectares of critically endangered Cooks River Castlereagh ironbark forest. So this is a critically endangered community which has the same protection as the bell frog, possibly more. There's a patch 1.8 hectares in size. They want to take 1.4 hectares of that. So that leaves the remaining patch at 0.4 hectares, which is less than 0.5, which is the threshold size for a viable patch. So the remaining area will not even be protected anymore. So they're essentially taking 1.8 hectares of this community. And then removal of 1.8 hectares of threatened swamp sclerophyll forest on Cogra Golf Course, as well as unspecified biodiversity loss through urban vegetation and the possible extinction of the green and golden bell frog, Lower Cooks Cove, Key River population. Yeah, sorry. There we go.